Hi everybody and welcome back to my modeling channel. So today we're gonna build an F-15 Strike Eagle from Revell on scale 1/72. So I normally don't do those modern jet fighter, but this was a request from a friend of my son. So Omar, those build is for you. So now let's open the box and do the kit review, and then we're gonna start on the build. So let's start initially with the instruction sheet and what we have. So it's almost it's really a booklet actually. Where are the decals? I'm looking for the decals. So as you can see, you have the kit descriptions. Everything is in color, and that's quite nice, especially when you're going to want to do some details, especially for the cockpit and the ejection seat. Cockpit is in few parts, as you can see, lots of details. So it's going to be a very interesting build, and as you can see, and we're going to go and move on to the decal sheet later on. So basically those colors are for the 75th anniversary of the Force Air Force. So you got some really nice parts, but as I could see earlier on, you'll have some decals, basically the light gray decals, and so I'm gonna use those ones especially basically for here, as you have the American logo or cockade, and this one is a little bit difficult for me, so I won't be able to make it easily, so with the airbrush, so I'll be able to do that with just with those decals. So we're gonna move on now to our kit itself and to the decals. So here we are, the decals printed by Revell. I have to say normally they are very thin, and I always had really good was always nice to work with those type of decals, so very easy to work with. So you have a lot of details for the cockpit, for the screens. You have all the panels and all the little logos, and of course that special livery for that 75th anniversary. So we're gonna move on now to the kit, and as you can see, the kit has a lot of parts. So we're gonna start sprues by sprues. So we have one sprue and two sprue basically who are identical. So this sprue is, one is for, you have some main landing wheels, and you have the jet exhaust of one of the engine, and you have the same for the wheels, and then I would say the fuel tank and the bombs or missiles for each side. So you have some sign winders. Sign winders are here and there, and you have some Maverick missiles. I don't know the name of those bombs as well, so but I'm sure you can let me know in the comment box if you know which one they are. And now we're gonna move on mainly to the aircraft. So what we have is we have the upper side of the fuselage with the lower part of the wings. There is a fuel tank, and those are the air intake, one part of the cockpit with this ejection seat, the main landing gear. I have to say that the kit is really nice because you have lots of details. I'm sure you can see now, yeah, and it's fine engravement, so you have all the panel lines and structure lines are already engraved within the kit, so it's going to be really nice to work with this. We're going to be able to do a little bit of weathering most probably, and we move on. Basically those are the air intake. Then we're gonna go to the lower part of the fuselage, the gear bay, the twin vertical stabilizer, front of the cockpit, the nose, and some part of the ejection seat. So a very nice kit so far with lots of details. And the last part, now we have the side part of the of the aircraft, the back part as well, and we also have another part of the cockpit, most of the parts for the instrument panel, and basically lots of small other details. Now we're gonna move on to the clear parts in that bag, and the clear parts basically are pretty simple. We're gonna have the canopy, the viewfinder or the head-up display, which is here, and of course the front part. So quite nice kit. So enough of talking, and let's start building. So we're gonna prepare that, start that build by preparing all our parts. So we're gonna initially prepare all the cockpit parts, and then we're gonna assemble them together as long as the nose will well. So there will be a little bit of a fitting, and initially I'm gonna see how the parts are fitting together before gluing them together. And I will keep the dashboard for later on. Then I will start preparing also all the ejection seat, and then we're gonna start to continue that build. But initially we're gonna assemble the wheel well, the cockpit, and then the cockpit seat. I have to say that that kit is also a little bit interesting, because it's a little bit not as conventional as I normally see. The second part is to assemble basically the exhaust and the turbines. So that was quite a surprise, because we're gonna build all the kit basically around this part. Then of course we're gonna start working on the wings, and I'm gonna remove also all the excess plastic, and slowly work on these, and then prepare as well the fuel tanks, the external fuel tanks. So we're gonna prepare that. Then after we're gonna, once they will be finished, of course there will be some gap to close. But then what we will do is we're gonna add the wings basically directly on that exhaust, which is quite surprising for me. It's the first time I'm starting a build like that, but why not? Actually it worked very well. You'll see the final result. Anyway, so after that we're gonna add the upper surface of the wing directly gluing onto the lower part of the wing, and having that basically that exhaust pipe, and I'll use some clamp. Then we're gonna prepare basically the dashboard and glue that on the glare shield. And then of course now we're gonna put basically the horizontal, the vertical stabilizer, the fins, the twin fins on that fuselage. And while this will be drying, basically we're gonna go to the paint shop and put deck tan color basically to the cockpit and to the seat and the dashboard, as this is the color basically required. So I'm using just the Tamiya. And then I'm gonna start painting basically the instrument panel directly with a small paintbrush, and I'm gonna paint the dashboard directly on the kit. After this we're gonna put some decals. Basically I will use some decals for the cockpit, and I will add those decals basically on the instrument panel. That will give a little bit more realistic look to that cockpit, and that's gonna save me a lot of time instead of designing each instrument one by one, which I do sometimes, but on this particular time it was the easiest way for me. So we're gonna do this, and then of course we're gonna paint the screens with a darker color. So we will now work on our ejection seat. So basically initially I will use a matte black color on the overall of that ejection seat, and so I'll do that for both the front and the rear, and of course we will do both sides. While the paint is drying, I'll close some gaps basically with those external fuel tanks, and then of course I will also add a little bit, close some gaps basically on those wings, upper and lower, so on the junction basically, and also on the fuselage and on the junction and the gaps between basically the vertical stabilizer and the fuselage. Now we're gonna dry brush basically the cockpit. So I'm using some metallic color, and the dry brush technique basically is to give some more deepness to all the panel lines, and then we're gonna try to replicate all the switch with a very small paintbrush, and we're gonna try to design all those switch manually, and actually it worked pretty well. Then after that, of course, I had to add some more color on the glare shield and on the instrument panel, and we're gonna glue them directly to our cockpit. So after fiddling a little bit, now we will close the cockpit and the fuselage, the front part of the fuselage together, and we're gonna make sure that there is not too many gaps, and I had to do a little bit of a fiddling, and then to make sure that we have the proper setting, basically we will use some adhesive tape to make sure that that front part of the fuselage is well glued together and to ensure a pretty good bond. Now time to close the gaps with some regular putty, and I will use that Tamiya gray putty all over the part, just to make sure that to ensure that I have basically a smooth part later on. So once it's dried, of course, we're gonna remove the extra putty with some sandpaper, and we're gonna have that sanding time just a little bit time. We will now glue the lower part of the fuselage together. So for this, not a lot of things to describe, just that we're gonna put that lower part together. So they're gonna glue together, and then there will be some side as well to add. And so it's really surprising, because the build is all around basically that those ducts. And so that's quite interesting. I haven't done a kit like that before, but honestly, I mean, why not? It worked very well, and I have nothing to complain. So of course, after that, once we add all the parts, we're gonna close all those little gaps with a little bit of a putty, and we're gonna let it dry for a little bit. So it's now time to remove the extra putty, and so for this, of course, we're gonna use some sandpaper, and back to the sandpit basically, where we're gonna remove all that extra putty with water and sandpaper. I normally use water, as I mentioned already a couple of times, but for the new joiner on the channel, so I'm using that technique because it's much less dusty. It's avoid basically to collect all that dust around the office, so that's the only reason why, and it's also easier to clean later on. So we will now add the cockpit basically to the main fuselage and to the build, and just gonna add all the glues all around the parts, and then we're gonna be able to fix our cockpit. It's not gonna be too difficult, as you can see. It's working pretty well, and I have to say that the bones are pretty interesting. Then we're gonna add a little bit extra. We're gonna add the air intake to the engines, just above the main engines, and I have to say that that build is atypical, but it's really interesting because regarding of all the parts where you have to add the extra putty and this, there is much less than on some regular kits, so it was quite a nice surprise. So we'll now add all the missile pod or the bombs pod that are on the lower part of that fuselage, and we're just going to do this. Then there will be other pods later on to well, about 45 degrees angle down, but for the moment we're going to come back to our ejection seat. So we're going to have the hand grip painted in yellow color. Then we have to paint the seat cushions, and for this I use a khaki or olive daub color for that seat cushion basically. And then there is another, I think it's a gas bottle or something similar to this, and we're gonna use a regular green color. After that, I was using some very small adhesive tape to replicate basically the seat belt on that ejection seat. Then we're gonna use some deck tan color basically to paint those seat belt and to replicate them basically on the ejection seat itself. After that, of course, we're going to use the metallic color to replicate the buckle, and also we're going to use the dry brush technique just to give a little bit more deepness to the ejection seat and to a little bit of weathering. We will now close the cockpit, and for this I have to be always very careful using some extra thin glue from Tamiya to make sure that they dry very quickly and there is no mark, as this is very glue is always very unforgiving on those canopy, so you have to be very exerts a lot of cautions basically when you glue them together to the aircraft. So after that, of course, there will be a little bit of filling, and while this is drying, I will add and I will close some gaps on some other parts. I think those are laser guidance or things like that, but I'm not sure exactly. I'm sure one of you expert can explain us what this is on the comment box below. And of course now we're gonna close some more gaps with a little bit of extra putty. It's now time to remove all this extra putty with some sandpaper. So we're back to the same part, which take a lot of part of modeling actually. So a lot of sanding and removing extra putty, closing gaps. This is mainly what we do when we build a nice aircraft. So it's now time to add some more of that laser equipment, and then we're gonna also add some of those bomb pods on the side. They're about 45 degrees looking down. Took me quite a few pictures to be able to find the right setting, but I think I got it at the end. So we will now add them to the model. So it's now time to start the paint job. So what we're gonna do initially, we're gonna paint the wheel well in light color, same for the undercarriage and the rims, and then I'm gonna use light gray, which is a little bit darker gray than I'm normally using. And then what I'm doing right now is the pre-shading of the aircraft. So I'm basically going through all the panel line with the airbrush and paint that with a black color, and that's gonna give a little bit more deepness when we do the overall coating later on, as you will see. So that gives some excess panel lines, that gives some deepness, and that's what we call pre-shading and weathering. That's part of the weathering of the aircraft, but that's give a little bit more reality. So it takes quite a little bit of time and a bit of practice, because you have to work very close to have really a thin airbrush, and then after that, now we are able to start painting our engines as well. So for this I will use some other acrylic paint, and of course I'm using some I will use different tones. I've been using some exhaust color, I've been using some duralium, I've been using some steel, so all those give little different type of tones basically and give a more realistic aspect. So once this is finished, then we're gonna start now put the coat of light gray color on the overall aircraft, and basically we're gonna try to put a very thin coat, and that will allow us basically to have the pre-shading that we paint before, and that will come out later on, and that's gonna give us a more realistic effect to our model. So we will now start the decaling process, and for this I use the regular decals were provided in the kit. So those decals are coming from Revell, and that's a special edition. I don't know if it's the 100th or 80th anniversary of the squadron, but it was requested by a friend of my son. So Omar, if you're looking at that movie, well, I hope you enjoy it and you enjoy the model you have now in your room. So after that, so we will paint and put all the decals slowly one by one. So make sure that everything we have the proper aspect. And I have to say that some of those big decals require a little bit of extra time, because you really want to make sure that you don't have any wrinkle, and so it takes a little bit of extra time and careness, instead of the small or more regular size decal that you will apply. So while our decals are drying, we're gonna start building the exhaust for that F-15. So we have to prepare all the parts, as they were in many different parts, and then we're gonna add them basically inside the engines or the turbine, and then we're gonna build this all around, and then there will be other parts to build up. But overall, it was not too difficult to do. So we'll now finish painting the struts and the landing lights for the undercarriage. So the undercarriage has been already built and prepared, and so now we're just gonna finish basically painting the struts, get it ready, and then we're gonna be able to proceed and put it directly on the model. So this is the final part, and now we're gonna be able to put them directly on the model. So initially what we do a pre-fitting, and sometimes there are some correction to add, and which is the case at the moment. We were unable to reach that little hole, so I had to use a toothpick to remove the extra paint who came up in that hole, where I was able to fit basically the undercarriage. So we are back on the decaling process, and so basically what we're doing now, we're adding some more decals. There will be also some structure or panel lines and things that we have to add a little bit. So we're gonna slowly finish all the decaling process, and meanwhile we're gonna keep painting our exhaust as well. So while our decalings are drying, now we're gonna paint our exhaust, and for this I'm using some metallic acrylic paint. And so this initially the exhaust color that I'm using, and I'm gonna do both engines. So we're now gonna use another wash, and that's the traditional wash I'm using. Basically it's some pastel mixed with water and soap, and that gives me that dark color that I will add on extra panel lines, and that gives me basically that allow me to do some a nice weathering, and I can remove the extra wash without issues, as it can be a challenge depending on what kind of paint you are using. So now we're gonna finish the assembly of that engine. So after the duralium there was some other strut basically I was supposed to add. So we're gonna add them all around those engines, and then we're gonna be able to use a different, this time I will use a steel color just for those two parts, and that gives us a little bit more deepness to the model and to the exhaust. So we will now remove all the extra wash, and for this I'm using a cotton cloth, a humid cotton cloth, and I just remove, and I'm always trying to use the wind stream to be able to give the proper effect, basically the proper weathering effect on the model. After this I will still use some extra wash for the exhaust for the engines. I'm basically using something, sometimes some dried up, and I remove the excess while it's dry, and that gives us another little bit realistic effect. And then also I will use some accent panel line from Tamiya, and I will use that at a different part of the aircraft as well, just to give more some deepness to the model, and I will remove it before it dries. Then at least I have some track and some traces like oil stain and dirt coming out of those panel lines. And this is the final result of that F-15E Strike Eagle from the US Air Force. I hope you enjoyed that build with me. If you did so, please give me a thumbs up, subscribe to my YouTube channel, and I will see you soon for another build review and kit video. Thank you for watching.